My name is Peter Kalmstrom, and let's see. I should actually go off Skype for a moment. I usually don't, but let's see. Just a second. I'll do not disturb. Right. So let's go into that one. Skype's actually a very big part of my life. I was working at Skype for 5.5 years. If you've ever seen these things, that's what I was responsible for at Skype, the little highlighted phone numbers. So if you have a little flag on your phone numbers in your browser, that's my fault. I was working at Skype, responsible for doing that. And that looks rather simple, but I spent 5.5 years of it, so it got rather complicated in the end. And it's kind of the same thing with this problem that we're talking about today. Moving files into SharePoint, that's simple, right? Drag and drop. What's the problem? Why are we going to spend an hour talking about that? Well, just wait till I explain it to you, and it will be very complicated. There's a lot of things to think about. I have my own company with 12 employees, and we're trying to build products on top of SharePoint, and we've also been doing Outlook development for many, many years. I'm also consult for Cornerstone, and I do training. I'm an MCT, and since left Skype in 2010, I've been focusing on SharePoint development, SharePoint usage, SharePoint administration, and all that stuff. You can find my blog on blog.kalmstrom.com, and there's also a YouTube channel. And one of the backgrounds for this presentation is that I did a YouTube video on 7 different ways how to move data into document libraries, or files into document libraries. And you can do that as a reference. All those are valid, of course, but now we're talking about more, scalable ones. The drag and drop, that doesn't really work when you're talking about millions or thousands of documents. So that's a bit about me. The agenda for this presentation. Anybody missing the sponsors? Yeah, I'll get to that slide, don't worry. I'll get to that one too. Because there are probably alternatives to doing it the way I'm doing it. So that I want to take the sponsors. Probably a lot of the sponsors have solutions for this that I'm going to talk about. So I'm not an expert on those solutions, but you should probably check them out. So the agenda that we're going to go through today, I'm going to talk about first converting the files to the new file formats. If you're going to move stuff into SharePoint, you don't want to move doc files and XLS files. You want to move docx, the new file formats. There are a number of reasons to do that. So that's a first step I think that you should take, and I'm going to walk you through that step. Of course, has nothing really to do with SharePoint, but it's a good preparation step. The next step that you really should do is inventory all your files. Because you probably know that you have a lot of files, but what kind of files are they? Who manages those files? Who owns them? Who changed them last? What kind of file formats do we have? Because as you know, SharePoint does support a lot of file formats, but not all of them. So if you're moving a file share, then you need to think about which files should actually be moved. Do we still need to have the old file share, or should we move everything into SharePoint? So an inventory is very, very important, and I'm going to do a simple example of an inventory PowerShell script. And then I'm going to talk about SharePoint containers, because when you're moving data into SharePoint, you need to move them into something, right? And there are lots of different SharePoint containers. There's site collections, and inside the site collection there are sites, and inside the site there is document libraries. There could be folders. Maybe you want to use folders, probably not. And then, of course, there's tagging metadata of different kinds that you can use. So that's something you need to decide of, where should it go? You don't want to move all your files into one big document library. That will, well, it won't improve matters from your file share. And then I'm going to go through actually importing the files, and then I'm going to mention a few alternatives. If you find that this is kind of a lot of work, there are simpler alternatives, so I'll talk about those in the end. And I'll go through the hard work that you can do. I have a bunch of PowerShell scripts that I will share that do all of these steps. So I have one for converting files, and one for inventory, and one for SharePoint containers, so on. So I will go through those. So that's a major part of my presentation today. So there will be a lot of PowerShell code that I'm going to go through. I'm not going to go through everything line by line, but I'll point out some interesting things in these the PowerShell scripts. So that's the agenda. And for latecomers, again, if you have any questions, I'm offering drink tickets. I don't drink myself. So if you want I have 10 of these. So if you ask a question, a good one, that can even be recorded, then you get a drink ticket. So don't be shy. Any questions so far? Everybody with me? Okay, excellent. So, as I said, thanks to the sponsors that we can be here. Of course, I know that AvePoint has solutions for this kind of thing, and I'm sure some other of these partners also have finished solutions for moving data into SharePoint, migration tools. So you should certainly check that out too. What I'm showing here is stuff that just depends on having Office installed and having PowerShell installed, stuff that you already have. So this is the do-it-yourself variant. All right. So the reason I got into this and I started thinking about this seriously was that I got a big commission from Migrationsverket, the Swedish Department of Migration, and they called me in and had a project where they wanted me to move off their Fileshare. We want everything off the Fileshare into SharePoint. Okay, so that was the goal. And then we started doing an inventory, and we came up to 225,000 directories inside this file share, and up to 17 levels deep. So there were subdirectories inside subdirectories, about 1.5 terabytes of data. Not a huge amount of data, but a lot of them. I think about 2 million files, that's the number, and it's growing every day, of course, also. The oldest files in those file directories are from 1980. So, well, another thing that we're going to see here is that at Migrationsverket, I'm not going to talk too much about that. I'm going to have a simpler example. I don't have 1 terabyte of data and 225,000 directories here to show you, but I'm going to go through a simpler example just to show you the tools and the things you think about. But I did an inventory of their files and I was trying to make them make decisions based on that. So why don't we do a cutoff point? Why don't we say that we only migrate the files that have been changed in the last 2 years? No, that was very difficult. Okay, how about we do only the ones in those directories? No, that's very difficult too. So it ended up that we actually went through almost directory by directory. We're not finished yet. You might actually guess that one. But that's the method that we actually use. So we couldn't really agree on a break-off point that what should be migrated. So that's an interesting thing. I thought that we could make a decision like that, but nope, not yet at least. So the file share inventory, let's start with that. How we're going to find out what we have in this file share, and I'm going to show you a PowerShell script that does that. And of course, to do that, you need to have some prerequisites. You actually need to be able to read all of the files in the file share. And that's not taken for granted, of course, because there might be a huge file share, and having read access to all of that might be a lot. And there might be sensitive information in different places. So, and you also need permissions to actually read permissions, because that's a thing that you also need to inventory. Who has access to these files? And how is the whole permission structure on this file share? Are there 225,000 different permissions? Are there even different permissions on the files? And so that's something you need to know. Usually there's a backup account or an audit account or something like that you can use for those kind of things. Okay, so how are we going to do that inventory? A third-party tool, I guess there are plenty out there. I'm going to show you a PowerShell script that does it. And this PowerShell script I'm going to show you is the first version of it that I have simplified a bit. But the one that we're actually using, it outputs data into an SQL server because there's so much data that CSV file just doesn't cut it really. So But I'm going to show you one that just outputs the data to CSV files. So that's a bit simpler. So this is a PowerShell script that loops all the files in a directory and all the subfolders, and it outputs 3 different CSV files, one called folders, one called files, and one called permissions. So you can inventory the data based on those parameters. So let's start with that. And I'm going to show you my simplified little file structure here, the old file system. And that is a very simple file structure. It has 3 projects. And inside those projects, there are subfolders with different years. And inside those, there are some files. So a very, very simple file share. So that's what we're going to do an inventory on. And the scripts that I'm going to be using are on my desktop. And here is one called, there's a glare here, so I can't really see. There we go. Files inventory, PS1. And as I said, I'm going to share all these files with you. So if you want to take them and use them, that's fine. So let's skip that one for now. As you see, I simply have an input, 2 input parameters here. The inventory path, where I want where the files are, where the inventory text files are to be created, and it's actually the same directory as the directory that I want to inventory, just to keep it simple. And then I'm creating the files here, the permission CSV, the folder CSV, and the file CSV. And I'm deleting if there already are files there. And then I'm adding some headers to these text files. And then I'm going in and looping the folders. So this function here, the loop folders and subfolders and files, is being called in the bottom here. That's one thing I've been developing since I was 13, but this is rather this is my largest project so far on PowerShell. And one thing that you learn once you start working with PowerShell is that you need to declare all your functions first, and then you can call them at the bottom of the script. So that's kind of a strange thing. So here I actually call the function that I've declared up here. And please feel free to call out if you see errors in my code, or if you they could have done that better or something like that. That also earns you a drink ticket, by the way. I take that as constructive criticism, for a while at least. When I start crying, you can stop. All right. So that's what I do there. I loop the folders, and then I check, get the ACL, so the permissions on that, and I filter out some that are not interesting, the administrators or the system. I don't want to record those stuff, but otherwise I just output the data into the CSV file for each folder who has permissions here. Right. I'm also using, in some cases I'm using the regular dir commands here. I'm also using the file system object, so the scripting file system object. It turns out that the scripting file system object is much, much faster, hugely faster. I mean, when you're trying to do a search through all subdirectories, that goes really, really slow with a regular dir command. But with the file system object, it just goes really fast. I don't know why, but that's the way it is. So the file system object is a good thing to use. Welcome, everybody. I've been saying to the ones that were actually here from the start that if you ask questions, you get drinks, because I'm not going to use all these. So please feel free to interrupt me. So after I've looked into, I'm starting here with the files inventory, and we're looking at the permissions on each file. That's the first thing I'm doing. And then I'm looking at the folder size and the actual number of files in the directory. And finally, I'm going through the actual files and adding those into the file info. And again, there I'm looking at which folder it is in, the file name, last time it was written, the file size, those kind of things. Welcome, everybody. I didn't start early. All right. So I'm looking at the files inventory script here. So let's start and run that one. Should be rather quick. I have a very simple file structure here that I'm going to move. It's just on my C drive, I have a subdirectory and some subdirectories inside those, and then some files. So I'm going to just run this now. And as you see, this is outputting CSV files. So I'm just going to run that, and as you see, it ran through all of those. And when you're doing it at Migrationsverket, it takes a bit longer. It takes about a week to run through all those files, because they're on distributed file systems all over Sweden, and it takes a long time. That's that. Let's look at the output. The output is a simple CSV file, and as you see, I have 3 of them: one for the files, one for the folders, and one for the permissions. So now that we have this data, of course, I went into a lot of discussions with trying to get those cutoffs that I mentioned. That I want. How about we not import all of it? Let's just import the actual stuff that's relevant or new or interesting or good or something. But let's find some kind of cutoff points here. So we went into this CSV file, and let's just open that. And then I'm just going to break that down. Text to columns. I started with CSVs, hoping that commas should be good, right? It turns out that both folders and files can contain commas, so that was no good. So I'm delimiting these with pipes instead. So let's do that. So there we have all the folders and all the files. And now, of course, next step is to create a nice, let's see. I'm going to format that as a table, and then I'm going to create a pivot table of it all. Summarize with a pivot table. Okay. And then I can look at extension, for example. Just pull that down. And there I see this only has Office files, so it's very simple. Of course, I want to see how many files are in each. And of course, I also want to have a nice chart. If you're doing a demo, you need to have a chart at one point, right? Makes it very nice. All right. So here we can start, discussing all these XLS files. Should those really be files, or maybe some of them should be lists? That's one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to SharePoint. Maybe we should be using lists much more than documents. So that's something that we can certainly go into. We have 95 XLS files there. When it comes to Migrationsverket, it turns out that they have around 650,000 Word documents. So that's another story, but that's quite a lot. And I can also, of course, drag in here the sum of size, so I can summarize. So it's now about 20 megs of example data that I'm working with here. And of course, I can go in and look at certain directories, and just look at that directory and filter and all that. So I could discuss with each folder owner, or at least root folder owner, what are we going to do about your files? And that's going to keep me busy until I retire, I think. So that's the decision. But as I said in the beginning, Migrationsverket didn't really. They came to the realization that wow, we have a lot of files. We need to go through this. We didn't find any cutoff points. We couldn't decide that all the files later than should be, but we need to do it on a folder by folder basis. So we might end up doing something like a workflow where we have a list of all the 225,000 files, and somebody makes a decision on each and every folder. So you actually say that this is going to be imported, this will be archived and forgotten or something, or just deleted. There are a lot of files that should be deleted, definitely. Okay, so that's the first step actually on the process of migrating, doing an inventory on your files. Any questions on the inventory? Yes, go ahead.
With the PowerShell commands, see if you have the same file in different directories.
Definitely, based on file names, yes, definitely. You could say, for example, you just, well, actually it's not, the PowerShell script doesn't do that, but Excel is very good at doing that kind of thing. So if you simply go ahead and group by that, and then you can do just a sort on the sort there from the largest to smallest. Now you see I actually have just one file of each here, so there are no doubles here, but then you would see the doubles based on file name. And you could of course also do join the, if you have file name and the size, and if both those are the same, then it's probably the same file. So you could certainly do stuff like that. And I'm going to have a link later in the presentation to an object that Microsoft released, a scripting object that you can read a lot of the data without actually opening the file. So you can read which template is being used, how many words have been, how much time was spent on this document, stuff like that. So, and that's of course stuff you can get from the Office object model, but that's really slow. And you don't want to get into that if you can avoid it. But this file system, the reader object, I don't remember the name, I'll have a slide on it, that does it really, really fast. Definitely. Enjoy. Cheers, sir. I hope that inspires many more questions. Good question. Thank you. So yes, an inventory lets you find out stuff like that. Do we have a lot of doubles in our file system? That's very important, of course, because you don't want to import junk. You want to do an inventory and analyze. Go ahead. Sure. Mm-hmm. Right. I filter out that. So that's the last step. Once we've created all the containers and stuff, then I do an import of all the files. And then I filter out bad. And basically I've done a trial and error and found lots and lots of those. And then I filter out on the file name. Not yet, no. This is not a completed project. We're not there yet, but that will come definitely. Enjoy your drink. Good question. All right, moving on. Or any other questions? This is regarding inventory now. So next step then that I would like to talk about, I take that as a no. You don't have any questions? Well, that's the discussion helpers that I try to set up with regular pivot table in Excel, just having all the data and showing that and just being able to discuss. I think there are more of those files. Then the more you can categorize your information, the better it is. And if you can do that live in a discussion, that's really powerful. So pivot tables are really good, and we tried to do the migration cutoffs that I mentioned, created later than 2012 would be nice maybe. File types changed, stuff like that. We did that already. Now, the converting old Office files to new formats. You all know this stuff. Office 2007 has been out quite some time now. What is it, 6 years? But still there are a lot of old files in the old file formats. And that's bad for a lot of reasons. First of all, the files are larger. The new docx format or OpenOffice format, OpenOffice document format, is XML based, and the actual files are zip files. You've seen demos of that when you rename the docx file to a zip file, and you can go in and look at the XML. That's old stuff. That's really old stuff, right? It's 6 years old now, but companies still have a lot of old files in the old format. So you really want to move over to the new. The size improvements, I've seen numbers of 75%. I haven't seen them in action, but the example I'm going to give you now is 25%. But still, I mean, if you're talking about terabytes of data, then 25% is a lot of data too. There's also, if you've been to the search presentations on SharePoint, You've probably heard about the new format handlers in SharePoint 2013, and that works much better with the new file formats. It can analyze into the files. It basically understands better the headings inside the document if you are inside in the new file formats. So it's a good idea, right? And also it's old stuff, right? You want to be modern. You want to use the new file formats. And one thing, I mean, Migrationsverket has actually paid a lot of money and put a lot of time into migrating into the new Office versions. They're on their way up to Office 2013. But since they have so many old templates and stuff that still require the old file formats, they're always using this, what do you call it now? Protected, no, not protected mode. What? Compatibility. Cheers. Yes, exactly. They're always showing that, the compatibility mode. Yeah, and that's not good. So we want to migrate over. So let's show you how to do that. One thing that you need to consider, though, when migrating all those files is links. The links will break, and there's really no way around that, because there's different, the URL is different, or the path is different, because it's going to be an extra letter, the X at the end. So there's no way to avoid breaking all the links. And in a large company, the links could be everywhere. You could have, joined documents that point to one another. Here's more information about this. And there could be links in emails, web pages, shortcuts, chats, whatever. And doing an inventory on all that, well, that's another session. I'll have to come back next year about that. But we could possibly go through all the information and see all the links to all the documents, but that's going to be difficult, right? So if you're going to do the migration to the new file format, then you're going to have to inform users that all your links will break. And there's really no way around that, as far as I know. Please do tell me if I'm wrong, but I hope I'm wrong. So how do you do this now? Well, there's something called the Microsoft Migration Manager that I found after writing a lot of script for it. So, which actually does that. It's part of the Office 2007 migration package. There's a link there, which you can click once you get the presentation. You can, of course, manually open the file and save as in the new format. That will take you some time. And then there's the PowerShell script, which also will take you some time, because this is Office automation that I'm showing you. There are third-party libraries that can do this for you also, but we're using just the PowerShell script here. And that does exactly the same thing. It does file open and save as. So this convert Office files PS1 that I'm going to show you gives a bit more control, of course. And one thing that I've also put into this PowerShell is that I actually change the file dates. So if you do a file save as, then you get that this file was changed now, right, by the person who changed it. But I changed that in the script. So the file change date remains the same, and the author of the document remains the same. I don't want me to, I authored 1.5 million documents or whatever at Migrationsverket. I'll be famous for something else, I hope. Not that. Okay, so one thing, if you want to go the automating Office route, then you need to think about a lot of things. First of all, you need to have the language packs installed, because otherwise you can't open the files by automation. So if you try to open a file that has Swedish and you don't have the language pack, that creates problems when you're doing it through automation. So if you have a lot of different language files, then you need to install all the language packs on the machine that's doing the actual conversion. Then you must set the save format to be the new one, docx, and this is going to be slow. We're talking maybe 5 seconds per document, which adds up if you're talking about millions of documents. You need to make sure that, because when you're opening up lots and lots of documents, if you have documents that are, have passwords on them, that's going to create problems. If they're corrupted, Word will throw up dialogues about that. If the file is not trusted, then you won't be able to save it. If you get it up, opens it up in protected mode, then you won't be able to save it at all. You won't be able to edit it. Also, Word 2013 opens up files by default in read mode. Sorry, the view-only mode, whatever they call it. which means that you can't save it from there either. So you need to actually change the mode before. But the script does that. So anyhow, so trust center, you need to actually trust the link, make that a trusted path. And you need to disable these protected views. They do create problems. So let's go through the demo on how to do that. I have a script for that, of course. And it's convert office files. There we go. And again, I have some input parameters. The path where I want to convert my files from, and where I want to place the backups. Because I don't want to just remove the files. I want to keep the Office 97 files if something goes wrong, or when something goes wrong. So I have a backup directory here also. So that's that input. And then, of course, you see the COM object here, Word application, PowerPoint application, Excel application. Set the formats. One thing that's new in the docx format is that, or the new OpenOffice document formats, is that they can't contain macros by default. You have a special file format for that. So that's something I do. In the doc file, you can have macros, or there might not be macros. But when you're saving as a new, then you need to consider that. Is this going to be a docm, or is it going to be a docx? And of course, this script takes that into account too. Same thing with Excel and PowerPoint, of course. Also, they can also contain macros, of course. This is this part of the script that's rather interesting. Before I started thinking about that, I thought this was a read-only property that you can change, but it's not the case at all. You can set the creation time, last access time, and last write time on the file by PowerShell. And there's no magic here. It's just file. Yep, that's it. So that's an interesting thing. So here I'm just comparing the old file with the new file and setting the new file to the old file dates and all that. So rather good thing to keep in mind. And then I'm doing some regular string manipulation there. And then I have these functions here. The convert doc RTF, it works with RTF files also, and actually they had some Word perfect files also. So Word opens those and saves those in docx format also. So as you see, I open a document, and then I switch away. I go to print view. I don't want the reading view, because then I can't do a conversion, which is the next step. And as you see, this might fail. So I catch that error. And if there's been no error, then I build a path, and then I save it as docx. If it does not have a VB project, if it does, then I save it as a docm. Okay? Questions on that? Rather straightforward. This is going to take time, but it's rather straightforward. Same thing with PowerPoint. There's slight differences here in the object model. The names are slightly different. There's no convert here in PowerPoint. This only has it's called convert to. Excel, this does not have a convert. It just has a save as. Okay. All right. And then I'm looping the folders, going through and checking which file format it in. As you see, this supports doc, RTF, and the WordPerfect files. And then I'm setting the file times and moving the item from the path to the backup path. And then I quit the Office applications. Questions on that script? Straightforward? Good. Then I run that, and that should take some minute maybe. As you see, it's opening up the files here in the background, and it's just outputting those. And let's just see in the file directory what's happening. In the backup, old FS backup, now you see the files are being input there, and as you see, these files are now PowerPoint 97 files. So let's go to the same directory in there, and let's check that. And as you see, these are now the new file format. So rather straightforward. It's going to take time, but there's nothing really magical going on there. So that one, of course, you can use straight off. Questions on that? Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Definitely, definitely. Yes. You would have to. I don't think you can automate that with Office, but there are certainly libraries that will allow you to convert the files also. So you need. I'm not sure PowerShell by itself has the ability to save it as PNG or something like that, which would be more. So if you have BMPs that are huge, generally, I would like to save those as JPEGs or PNGs, but you would have to automate that too. And I'm sure that I have not done that yet. No, no. Not. I didn't look for them, but I'm sure that should be rather straightforward. Thank you. Now you see it's opening files here in the background, so you can actually set this to invisible also, but it's actually rather good to see that it's working. So I haven't set PowerPoint to invisible, so it's opening my files here. Any question? Yep. Yes. Nope, that wasn't really discussed at all. They have backup systems, of course, but no, the version history was something they wanted to move to SharePoint to get. They did not have that in the file system. No. Yeah. Well, they have this wonderful file versioning system based on saving a new file with a new file name. Exactly, that's the one. Yes, yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Yes. Yes, that would be. Yes, I considered it. I didn't do it, but yes, that's a good idea. Cheers. Yes, there's a lot of things that we could certainly do better here. Thank you. All right. So the next step now. It closed down a PowerPoint on me, which is good. That's the last row of the PowerShell script. Shut down PowerPoint. Okay. So, good advice. Don't do this during a presentation. All right. Let's see now. So the demo files, we did that. Okay. Files inventory. No. We did that already. Okay. Clean up after the script is done. Close down PowerPoint. All right. All right. So we've been through this. Converting files. All right. So, folders. You're all SharePoint experts here. You've heard the gripe about not using folders, right? Users have not. They will want to have folders. They're very fond of their folders. So there's a link here to 10 reasons to avoid folders. Very good presentation that I didn't make up. Yeah, there are lots of reasons. It's a bad way to store information. That's one of the reasons. But you do need to compartmentalize. You can't put everything in one place. So you need to put stuff into different containers. So that's one thing you need to think about. So could you place all the files in one document library? 225,000 file folders? Probably not either, right? You've seen that? Yep. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. SharePoint is not built for that. You need to, and also permissions. You could set permissions on folders, but no, you don't want to. Navigation, how are you going to find the files? Search will work badly, and it scales badly. Yeah, so you don't want to do that either. Now when we're going to convert file folders, you need to think about what are you going to do instead of creating folders. And of course, you need to choose which kind of container should this file folder be. Because what the users have done, what the people at the Department of Migration has done, is tried to organize the information the best way they could. And that turned out to be 225,000 folders. I keep ranting about that, but that's a type of organization that they like. So let's not throw it away. Let's try to make something good out of it if we can. Let's try to learn from that, okay? So we need to think about what should these folders represent. Should it be site collections? 225,000 site collections? Maybe not. But some of them might be. The root collections, there are 20 root folders in those 225. So maybe those should be site collections. That's a good way to break up so we don't have a huge content database, of course, also. Some of them could be subsites, some could be document libraries, and of course, the metadata. We're all talking about metadata, right? One piece of advice I can offer you there is don't use the word metadata. Users don't like that. Tagging is usually better. Categorization works too. If you have a librarian, if you're working at a city council or something like that, bring in the librarians. They're really good at this stuff. They know how to categorize information. It's not something we learn in any other, line of business, really. IT, you certainly don't learn it. How do you analyze information? How do you, well, lots of tools, but how do you categorize all this information? It's really difficult to do. I don't have the answers, I'm sorry, but that's the discussion we're going through now. And of course, yeah. So those file folders are metadata, of course, and you need to convert them into something. And these are the SharePoint artifacts that we have to choose from, right? So metadata is best, of course. We've all seen that. That's the future of tagging, and it's best. But it requires a lot of change to tag all this information. I've also been involved in the Department of Defense in Sweden. They're also trying to migrate lots and lots of data, and they rather quickly agreed on that we need to categorize with all these 20 metadata fields. All right. And they also have millions of files that they're going to migrate. And they are not talking about any project to migrate the files automatically. They're talking about doing it manually. It's your tax dollars at work. We're talking minutes per document to tag the information. Now, that's scary. And of course, it's going to be totally different based on the file system to actually find the files that they want to use or they want to read. End users need to be trained. And of course, we need to agree on which tags are relevant for the entire organization. For one department, that's one thing, but for the entire organization, that's much, much more difficult. And how low can you go? Some limbo here. In Migrationsverket, they have 17 levels. The 225,000 folders I keep harping about is 17 levels deep. So it's one thing to say that this is going into a document library, this is going into a site, but once it gets into 17 levels down, then it gets really, really difficult. So that's something you need to consider too. Some of this metadata you might have to throw out. This is not relevant. Let's just migrate it all. There are lots and lots of folders that are just named, like my bad example here with the years. That's typical metadata, right? Okay. So creating the containers. And here I have done a little bit of a start, but I'm going to start with this report, the folders. Just open that, and as before, okay. Something is wrong here. Why is it? Oh, the information panel wants to show up. All right. I'm just going to split that up again. Data, text to columns, limited. Before I'm using the, there we go. So now these folders, these are the folders that you've already seen. Let's see, I'm actually going to sort them alphabetically here now so that it makes better sense. Sort A to C, there we go. And here I can now decide. Now here I can what we've done is gone through these folders and made decisions based on each folder. What should this be? And I've made 3 examples already of how this could be done. And let me show you those. Old choices. So the simplest one, and the one that users might like, is this one. You see the choice? FLD, FLD, FLD. That's folders, right? So that just creates folders straight off. So let's actually run that and see, because I have a PowerShell script that does all that, that creates all the based on this input. So I'm just going to close this Excel file right now. Don't save. Don't save that either. And then I'm going to run the script. Let's see. Just copy the file name of that. And then we're going to run this create containers PS1 file. There, create containers. Edit. I always use this ISE development tool for PowerShell. It's much, much better than running things from the prompt. Got some color coding and stuff. So input folder choices. This is the one. Choices folder, right? And I already have a site which is totally clean. Just gonna open that without the. There we go. I actually have that open already, I think. Yes, there we go. This is the one. SharePoint Saturday Stockholm. I think this is the one, right? Yes. Totally empty, nothing special here. The only thing that I've done is enabled the publishing infrastructure because I'm using that for the navigation. So that's the only thing I've done. Otherwise, it's just straight out of the box. All right. So now I'm going to show you the details of this script also, but I'm just going to run it now and see what happens. Run. While that's working, let's go in and look at the other alternatives. Now you see it's creating folders there slowly. Okay. And these are now created by default just in the documents. So you see I have a project 1 and then one for each year, all right? And then based on that, the PowerShell script also outputs another file called the created containers, CSV. And that contains the actual SharePoint, sorry, there we go. This is the one. Created containers, that's another CSV file. Again. No. There we go. As you see, I'm creating these folders and where they went and what type of object it was and the URL for it. So this text file is then used for the final step, importing the data into SharePoint. That's another script. So let's actually run that too. And where's that script? All my scripts are on the desktop. That's a good place to keep them. Files inventory, copy files. That's the one we want. So I'm going to go through that one later also. Show you what that does, because that's the SharePoint interesting one that actually creates or uploads files. All right, copy files. As you see, that takes the CSV file, the created containers, and just imports the data into that. And here's the question you asked before, what about all the file name stuff? Here's a simple script that does some of that at least. Remove some of the unwanted characters that you can't really have in SharePoint. So let's just run that. Yeah, we did that before. Yes. Or? Special sites. Characters. No, I didn't. No, I cleaned that out here while I'm importing them. So there will be a name change also. If there is an illegal character, the file name will change. So one way you can, that I really will do once I actually do this in real life, then I'll remove the files from the file system and put a link there, saying now the files are over here, right? So now you see it's pumping in the files one by one. And let's go back here and see project 1, 2012. And here you see my files are there. One thing, I haven't got the same users on the file, but that is in the script too, setting the actual writer so we have the same author of the file still, even though we moved it over. But the date is the right. It's not today, all of those files. It's still the same file date that we have from the file system. And that's an important point that you need to consider also. That's the subject of this topic, right? Things you need to consider. I'm not saying use my scripts, they'll solve all your problems. That's not my goal here. My goal is that however you do this, you need to think about these things. That's, you don't want to lose the metadata of when was the file changed. Because that's what's going to happen if you drag and drop the files, then the information is gone. So that's the one. All right. That's rather bad, right? Just regular folder structure. That doesn't make anybody happy. So let's try another one. And while we're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and clean that out. The create site collection. This is a rather dangerous PowerShell script that you should absolutely not use. It deletes the site collection and the content database and creates a new content database. It's very good for testing because it doesn't clutter up your hard drive or anything, but you should never use that in production, of course. So now I'm just starting over. That's bad if you remove the content database. All right, so let's look at the other one, and a somewhat better alternative. Let's create one with webs and document libraries. Open that. Here's to see it's the same file directories that I have, but now I've made different choices here. The webs and document libraries. Much better, right? So this is still creating my new site collection now, my new clean site collection. So while we're waiting for that, and I'll go through the script of creating the containers. I'll show you that PowerShell script. All right, create containers. That's the one we just ran before to create folders. As you see, I have the site collection and the web that I'm working on and the document library that I'm working on and the latest folder level I'm on. Those are global objects that I keep working on there, and I have an input file, the file that my configuration file for this. And also I'm creating a link and the old files. I'm going to show you that soon. So that's the input parameters. And I'm turning on publishing infrastructure. Here's an interesting part and very important one. In general, if you're using PowerShell to automate SharePoint, if you're using Swedish language pack, then you need to make sure that your script actually runs in Swedish too. Because if the thread that the PowerShell script is running on is running in English, and you're trying to do something with a Swedish SharePoint site, that will fail in very mysterious ways. Very strange error messages. So this is an important one, set culture. So you actually need to set the thread culture of the PowerShell script, because otherwise you get into trouble. And here I'm doing exactly that. I'm getting the UI culture of the SharePoint site and setting that so that my PowerShell script runs. So that's an important one you need to remember. Then I have some more clean file name code there. And then I have some output information, just outputting that I've created a new object. And then I have code for creating document libraries. And nothing special about that. I'm creating in the current web, I'm creating a new list. As you see, I have two variants of that. I'm creating document libraries, or, oh my, 5 minutes more. Sorry. Good. And picture libraries. All right. And then I'm setting a navigation link. There we go. Now my new script is done. So let's run this again now with a better variant. Let's see, where am I? There. I was afraid I didn't have enough material, but we're running out of time here, so let's see now. The choices. This is the one we want to make. Let's make that one. Name that and get the file name, and then run that script too. Did I do folders again? I don't want to do that again. Thank you. That's the one I want to do. I owe you a drink. Thanks. That would have been bad. Showing that once is enough, right? You showed folders. Right, there we go. Running that now, and now as you see, it's creating a team site here called Project 1, and that of course takes a bit longer. And then I'm going to create document libraries. That was you, right? Thank you. So it's creating the sites and the document libraries, and well, that's about it. That's all I chose. Let me also show you a third variant of this, where I have the choice. Open that. And here I've simply chosen that this should be a choice field. instead. So I input the full name of the folder 2012, 2013 in a choice field. So I get that as a tagging. So that's, of course, the better way of doing it, but it takes a bit more. The problem with this is that creating a new document library, that's rather easy in the UI. Adding a new item to a choice is rather difficult. It requires permissions, and it also requires you to find the list settings and the library settings in this case, and find the field and actually add another one. So that's a bit difficult. All right, I guess I'm running out of time, but you've seen the creating containers, and you, of course, will get all the script, and I'll be available after if you have any questions. But I'm going to have a few slides and things I want to say before we go. Importing files and putting them in the right place, setting metadata, permissions, of course, last saved by, author. I'm not doing this, but this is, of course, something you should do if you're doing this for yourself. Also create a lot of views so that the users can see the information in the right way. Demo importing that. Okay, last slide is this. Other alternatives. Go out and talk to the partners out there. A lot of them have solutions for this that are probably better than my homemade scripts, but you're welcome to use my scripts, of course. The best solution that you probably should be using is don't do this at all. Just let the information be. Just import the data from the last year. Index it and display it via search instead. Go to the search presentations and look at how to build a result source and show it in search instead. I can show you how that. I did a quick demo on that too. Like here. Let's see now. There, I've done exactly that. Whoops, no. There we go. As you see, I've changed the search. It says search SharePoint there. Okay, now. So I'm searching for C#. This is a totally empty site, so there's nothing there. But as you see, I've created a new search vertical there, which has indexed the old files. So I'm going to click on that, and there you see I get the files from the file directory. So that's the simplest way of doing it. Yes, sir.
Question with that script importing the files, but where you clean up the legal characters.
Yeah.
You have two file names similar, just with the exception of the illegal characters, and you have two different illegal characters.
Yep.
If you clean them out, you will get the same file name.
Yes.
And if you import them, you will have a second version of the file, and the file is not the first file is moved. So do you have some checking for that?
I don't. No. How are you doing? Sorry. That's a good point. A very good point. Yes. That's another thing you need to think about. Yes. Sorry. That is the goal of this presentation, that all the things you need to think about when migrating to SharePoint. I hope you have enjoyed this session. Thank you for coming, everyone.